June 12, 1941. FBI Headquarters, Manhattan. Special Agent Thomas Donegan watched through a one-way mirror as Hermann Lang sat motionless in the interrogation room, hands folded on the metal table. The 39-year-old machinist had worked at the Norden Company for 14 years. He spoke English with only a trace of accent. He had been a naturalized American citizen since 1939. His employment record was spotless. His work was precise, methodical. He had access to classified blueprints because supervisors trusted his discretion. That trust had been catastrophically misplaced. What neither Lang nor his FBI interrogators yet knew was that the confession he was about to make would reveal the greatest intelligence failure in American military history. The device Lang had stolen, America's most jealously guarded secret weapon, had been in German hands since November 1937. Every elaborate security measure, every armed guard, every bombardier's oath to defend the secret with his life, all of it had been theatre. The show had been performed for an audience that already knew the ending. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. The Germans had possessed complete plans for the Norden Bombsight for nearly 4 years. They had built working models. They had tested it against their own designs at Rechlin, their primary aircraft evaluation center, and they had reached a conclusion that would devastate American strategic bombing doctrine. A conclusion based not on propaganda or arrogance, but on cold engineering analysis and mathematical certainty. The Norden Bombsight, despite costing over $1 billion and requiring 50,000 precision-trained bombardiers, would fail to achieve the pinpoint accuracy that American war planners had staked their entire air strategy upon. The story of how German engineers came to examine captured American technology and understood immediately why 20,000-foot precision was a mathematical impossibility begins, not in Manhattan, but in a Hamburg office building in summer 1937, when Oberst Nikolaus Ritter of the Abwehr received an urgent request from Luftwaffe intelligence. Ritter commanded air intelligence operations for Germany's military intelligence service. His mission was simple in concept, impossible in execution. Penetrate American aviation industries. Obtain technical specifications of new aircraft, engines, and bombing systems. The Luftwaffe particularly wanted information about a device that American press reports occasionally mentioned in vague terms, a bombsight so accurate, these reports claimed, that it could drop a bomb into a pickle barrel from 20,000 feet. The Americans called it the Norden Bombsight, after its Dutch-born inventor Carl Norden. Intelligence reports suggested it incorporated gyroscopic stabilization, analog computation, and automatic bomb release. But specifications remained classified at the highest level. Even America's closest allies, including Britain, had been repeatedly denied access despite offering radar technology and jet engine designs in exchange. Ritter's network of German sympathizers in America's German-American communities had provided valuable intelligence on aircraft production, but none of his operatives had access to the Norden facility. The company maintained extraordinary security, background checks on all employees, armed guards patrolling the factory, classified materials stored in vaults. Even the Navy's Bureau of Ordnance, which funded Norden's work, maintained strict compartmentalization of technical knowledge. In September 1937, a routine intelligence shipment arrived at Ritter's Hamburg office from New York. Among the documents was a set of hand-drawn technical sketches, accompanied by a brief note. The source worked at 80 Lafayette Street in Manhattan, the Norden factory, and he was eager to meet with a special envoy. Ritter departed for New York in November 1937, traveling undercover as a textile merchant. The address his source provided led to a German-American neighborhood in Queens. Hermann Lang answered the door. He was compact, precise in his movements, with the careful hands of a skilled machinist. He had immigrated to America in 1927 at age 25. He had taken classes to improve his English. He had applied for naturalization. He had married an American woman, but Lang considered himself German. He had served in the German army during World War I. He had witnessed Germany's humiliation in defeat. When Hitler came to power, promising to restore German greatness, Lang believed. When the Duquesne spy ring recruited him in 1936, he agreed without hesitation. His work at Norden gave him access to classified drawings. His position as an assembly inspector meant he understood not just individual components but complete systems. His photographic memory, trained through years of precision work, allowed him to memorize complex technical specifications. Over 3 meetings in New York, Lang reconstructed the complete Norden Bombsight from memory. He sketched the mechanical analog computer with its network of gears and linkages. He detailed the gyroscopic stabilization platform with its 3-axis freedom. He explained the optical sighting system and the telescope that allowed bombardiers to track targets from miles away. He described the electrical interface that connected the bombsight to the aircraft's autopilot, allowing the device to actually fly the airplane during the bombing run. Most critically, Lang provided the mathematical principles underlying the device. The Norden was a tachometric bombsight. It continuously solved differential equations based on airspeed, altitude, wind velocity, and bomb ballistics. Given these inputs, it calculated the precise moment for bomb release. The analog computer performed these calculations mechanically using a ball and disc integrator similar to those used in differential analyzers. As the bombardier tracked the target through the telescope, the bombsight measured the rate of angular change. This rate, combined with altitude and airspeed, allowed calculation of ground speed. Ground speed minus airspeed provided wind velocity. These values fed into the ballistic calculator, which determined the bomb's trajectory. Ritter photographed Lang's sketches using a miniature camera. The film went into a hollowed-out book. The book traveled to Germany via ocean liner in November 1937. Lang received $3,500, though he insisted the payment was secondary. His primary motivation was patriotism to the land of his birth. In Hamburg, Ritter's technical staff examined Lang's drawings with growing excitement. If accurate, these sketches represented a revolutionary advance in bombing technology. The Americans had achieved miniaturization and precision that German designers had considered impossible given the manufacturing limitations of the era. The sketches went immediately to the Luftwaffe's Technical Intelligence section for evaluation. By early 1938, German engineers at the Technisches Amt had built a working prototype based on Lang's specifications. The device functioned exactly as described. Initial testing at Rechlin, the Luftwaffe's primary evaluation facility, confirmed that the American design worked. The question was whether it worked well enough to justify the enormous manufacturing complexity it required. In June 1938, Lang took vacation leave from Norden and travelled to Germany, ostensibly to visit family. In reality, Ritter had arranged meetings with Luftwaffe technical experts. At Tempelhof Airfield in Berlin, Lang met with senior officers from the Technisches Amt and representatives from Carl Zeiss Jena, Germany's premier optical and precision instrument manufacturer. The Germans brought their prototype Norden alongside. The Luftwaffe 7, or Luftwaffe 7, the bombsight Carl Zeiss had developed for the Luftwaffe. The comparison revealed fundamental differences in design philosophy. The Norden bombsight consisted of 2 separate units. The stabilizer remained fixed in the aircraft, containing gyroscopes that maintained a stable platform independent of aircraft motion. The sight head, called the football because of its ovoid shape, mounted on top of the stabilizer. It contained the analog computer, the telescope, and the controls. Bombardiers had to master dozens of adjustments: altitude, airspeed, ballistic coefficient of the bomb, wind correction, drift angle. The device required extensive training. The Army Air Corps bombardier schools ran 3-month programs focused largely on Norden operation. The Luftwaffe 7 was dramatically simpler. It consisted of a single metal box containing the vast majority of the mechanism. A tube extended from the bottom with a mirror that reflected the target image into a small telescope in the box. The mechanisms combined stabilization and computation in an integrated package. Controls consisted primarily of 3 large knurled knobs. A competent bombardier could master the Luftwaffe 7 in days rather than months. German test pilots flew comparison missions from Rechlin throughout summer 1938. Both bomb sites performed similarly under ideal conditions: clear weather, steady winds, no combat stress. Under these circumstances, both achieved circular error probable of approximately 75 feet from 20,000 feet. But the Germans identified several critical disadvantages in the Norden design. Manufacturing complexity was extreme. Each Norden bombsight required approximately 2,000 precision parts. Many components demanded tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. The ball bearings alone required specialized manufacturing capability. Germany's bearing industry, centered in Schweinfurt, was already operating at maximum capacity, producing bearings for tanks, aircraft, and submarines. Diverting resources to bombsight production would impact other critical weapons programs. The autopilot interface, the feature that made the Norden theoretically superior, introduced vulnerability. If the autopilot malfunctioned, if electrical connections failed, if combat damage severed the control linkages, the bombardier lost the ability to maintain precise aim. The Lotfe 7 operated independently. It required the pilot's cooperation for final approach, but mechanical failure in one system did not cascade into complete bombing inability. Maintenance requirements were daunting. The Norden's complexity meant more potential failure points. Vibration from aircraft engines could knock the gyroscopes out of alignment. Temperature extremes affected the lubricants in the mechanical computer. The optical system required constant cleaning and adjustment. American doctrine called for dedicated maintenance facilities at every bomber base, staffed by specially trained technicians. Germany's logistical system, already strained supporting operations across Europe and Africa, could not support such infrastructure. But the most damning conclusion German engineers reached concerned the fundamental premise of precision high-altitude bombing. The Norden bombsight, however sophisticated, could not overcome the physics of bomb ballistics. A bomb dropped from 20,000 feet travels through air for approximately 45 seconds before impact. During that descent, countless variables affect trajectory: wind shear at different altitudes, temperature gradients creating density variations, the bomb's own aerodynamic instabilities as it tumbles through supersonic and subsonic flight regimes, manufacturing variations in bomb fins, fuses, and explosive fill creating weight imbalances. The Americans had built an extraordinarily precise device to calculate the release point, but they had overlooked the fact that bombs were not precision instruments. A 500-pound general-purpose bomb had a ballistic coefficient that varied between manufactured lots. Fin alignment might be off by a fraction of a degree. The center of gravity might not align perfectly with the longitudinal axis. Each imperfection translated into trajectory deviation. German wind tunnel testing and ballistic calculations performed at Peenemünde, the secret weapons research center on the Baltic coast, confirmed that even with perfect bombsight accuracy, circular error probable from 20,000 feet could not be reduced below approximately 300 feet under combat conditions. Industrial haze reduced visibility. Cloud cover forced bombing through gaps or using radar aim points. Anti-aircraft fire forced evasive maneuvering during the bomb run. Fighter attacks disrupted formation integrity. The Americans, German analysts concluded, had invested enormous resources in solving the wrong problem. They had built a device that could calculate the release point to within feet, but they dropped bombs that scattered across hundreds of yards regardless of calculation precision. It was like using a micrometer to measure a rubber band. In August 1938, the Technisches Amt submitted its formal evaluation to Luftwaffe Command. The Norden bombsight represented impressive engineering. It demonstrated American manufacturing capability and technological sophistication, but it offered no tactical advantage sufficient to justify abandoning existing German designs and retooling production facilities. The recommendation was unambiguous. Continue development of simplified Carl Zeiss designs. Maintain focus on tactical bombing, supporting ground operations. Reject the American doctrine of precision strategic bombing from extreme altitude as fundamentally flawed. Hermann Göring, commander of the Luftwaffe, accepted this assessment. German air doctrine emphasized close air support for Wehrmacht, ground forces. The blitzkrieg strategy required bombers that could hit specific tactical targets like bridges, rail junctions, and troop concentrations. These missions demanded accuracy, but from medium altitude where visual identification was possible. The Ju-87 Stuka dive bomber could place bombs within meters of the aim point by diving directly at the target. This method was less sophisticated than the Norden's automation, but far more effective for the missions Germany planned to fly. The strategic calculation was equally important. Germany lacked the industrial capacity America possessed. German factories could not match American mass production. Every penny spent on weapons development had to show clear tactical advantage. The Norden Bombsight was a luxury weapon. It required extensive training, complex maintenance, and perfect conditions to achieve its theoretical precision. Germany needed weapons that worked reliably in the hands of adequately trained crews under adverse conditions. This assessment reflected hard-learned lessons from the Eastern Front. German tactical doctrine emphasized flexibility and improvisation. Equipment had to function in Russian winters and Ukrainian summers. Maintenance had to be possible with limited tools in field conditions. Weapons too complex for average soldiers to operate reliably were worse than useless because they created false confidence followed by catastrophic failure. The Norden represented the opposite philosophy. It assumed unlimited resources for training and maintenance. It assumed operations from established bases with specialized facilities. It assumed weather and combat conditions would allow the precision the device theoretically provided. These assumptions might hold for America, operating from secure British bases against an enemy in terminal decline. They would never hold for Germany fighting on three fronts, with logistics stretched beyond breaking. German operational analysis examined not just whether the Norden worked, but whether it would improve Luftwaffe effectiveness given realistic constraints. The answer was definitively negative. German bomber crews were already operating with inadequate training due to fuel shortages limiting flight hours. Adding a complex bomb site requiring 3 months to master would delay crew readiness without corresponding improvement in accuracy under combat conditions. German maintenance infrastructure was already overwhelmed. Bf-109 fighters were being cannibalized for parts. Panzer divisions operated at 50% strength because tank production could not keep pace with losses. Diverting precision manufacturing capacity to bomb sites would directly reduce production of fighters, which were desperately needed to counter Allied bomber streams. Zeiss continued developing the Lotfe 7 through 1939 and 1940. The Lotfe 7C, appearing in January 1941, incorporated gyroscopic stabilization while maintaining the simple 3-knob control system. It became the standard bomb sight for He-111 and Ju-88 medium bombers. Later versions worked in the Arado 234 jet bomber, where the single pilot had to fly the aircraft and operate the bomb sight simultaneously. The simpler Zeiss design made this possible. Germany never manufactured the Norden Bombsight in operational quantities. When General George Patton's Third Army captured a factory in the Tyrolean Alps in April 1945, they found devices marked Luftwaffenzielgerät EZ-42. Technical intelligence officers initially believed they had discovered advanced German technology. Detailed examination revealed they were Norden copies, built from Lang's stolen plans, never deployed because Luftwaffe doctrine had no use for them. Meanwhile, in America, the security theater continued. On December 2, 1941, 5 days before Pearl Harbor, the acting chief of the Bureau of Aeronautics wrote enthusiastically to the Secretary of the Navy, "The Norden bombsight is considered to be the principal single factor of superiority which the air forces of this country possess over those of potential enemy countries." The FBI knew better. In July 1940, informants revealed that Hermann Lang had been ordered to return to Germany. Surveillance confirmed he was preparing to flee. On June 19, 1941, FBI agents arrested Lang at his Queens home. The arrest netted 32 other members of the Duquesne spy ring, the largest espionage prosecution in American history. Lang pleaded not guilty despite overwhelming evidence. His trial ran from September 1941 through April 1942. Government prosecutors assured the public that no significant secrets had been compromised. They claimed compartmentalized security at Norden meant no single employee had access to complete specifications. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. These assurances were false. The New York Times reported in April 1942 that the secret of the Norden Bombsight, this country's most jealously guarded air defense weapon, has been in the hands of the German government since 1938. Lang received 18 years in federal prison. He served his sentence at Leavenworth and was released in 1950, immediately returning to Germany. The damage had been done years earlier. More damaging than the theft itself was what happened next. Nothing. American military authorities continued treating the Norden as though it remained secret. Bombardiers still swore oaths to defend the device with their lives. Guards still escorted the bombsights from secure vaults to aircraft before each mission. Thermite grenades were still issued to destroy the devices if aircraft were shot down. The ritual persisted even as hundreds of Norden-equipped bombers were lost over Europe beginning in 1942. Each loss represented another opportunity for German intelligence to examine the device. By 1943, German forces had recovered numerous intact or partially intact Norden bombsights from crashed B-17s and B-24s. Technical examination confirmed what Lang's stolen plans had already revealed. The Americans had built exactly what their propaganda claimed, a technological marvel, and it was failing to achieve its promised precision. Combat reports from 8th Air Force operations over Germany told the story. American strategic bombing doctrine refused to acknowledge. Missions against specific factories, railroad yards, and synthetic oil plants achieved hit rates far below predictions. A 1943 study revealed that only 5% of bombs dropped by 8th Air Force aircraft fell within 1,000 feet of the aim point. Not 5% hit the target. 5% landed within 3 football fields of where they were aimed. The statistics told a grimmer story when examined mission by mission. On April 17, 1943, 8th Bomber Command conducted Raid No. 52 against the port of Bremen. 115 B-17s took off from bases across East Anglia. Only 106 reached the target through weather and German fighter opposition. 16 bombers were shot down over the target, each carrying 10 men. 160 aircrew died or were captured in a single afternoon for bombing results that intelligence analysts later classified as negligible. Bremen was attacked again on June 13 in Raid No. 63. This time, 102 B-17s reached the target. 26 failed to return. The 260 men aboard those aircraft represented more casualties than the entire American ground force suffered at Lexington and Concord. The factory complex they had bombed returned to partial production within 6 weeks. The October missions of 1943 became known as Black Week. On October 8, 357 bombers attacked industrial targets at Bremen. Anti-aircraft fire damaged 2/3 of the aircraft that made it over the target. German fighters pressed attacks all the way from the Dutch coast to the target and back. 10% of the attacking force was destroyed. One B-17 from the 100th Bomb Group, nicknamed Just a Snap-in, limped home on 3 engines with over 800 holes in its fuselage. It crash-landed in a field after hitting a tree. The bombardier had used his Norden bombsight exactly as trained. His bombs fell 200 yards from the aim point, demolishing workers' housing instead of the machine shops they had targeted. 2 days later, the 8th Air Force struck deeper into Germany, attacking ball-bearing factories at Schweinfurt. The ball-bearing plants were considered critical targets. Germany's tank, aircraft, and submarine production all depended on precision bearings manufactured in Schweinfurt's factories. Destroying them would cripple German war production across multiple sectors. The theory was sound. The execution was catastrophic. 291 B-17s departed English bases. 60 failed to return. The 600 men aboard represented a loss rate of 20%, unsustainable by any measure. The survivors reported that German fighters had developed new tactics specifically designed to counter the defensive firepower of B-17 formations. Focke-Wulf 190 fighters approached head-on where bomber defenses were weakest. Messerschmitt 1-10 heavy fighters stood off beyond effective machine gun range and fired 21-centimeter rockets into the formations. Each rocket that connected destroyed a bomber instantly. The bombing accuracy at Schweinfurt was assessed at 12% of bombs within 1,000 feet of aim points, not 1,000 feet of the target, 1,000 feet of the aim point itself. In practice, this meant that most bombs fell somewhere within the industrial district of Schweinfurt. Some hit ball-bearing factories, others demolished residential neighborhoods, commercial blocks, rail facilities that had nothing to do with ball bearings. It was damaged as part of area saturation. Weather was the primary culprit. Northern Europe's climate meant cloud cover existed 70% of the time. Bombing through clouds was impossible with optical bomb sights. Pilots had to wait for breaks, reducing surprise and allowing defenses to concentrate. Industrial haze obscured targets even in clear conditions. Smoke from previous raids drifted across aim points. German defenders quickly learned to deploy smoke generators around critical installations. The men who flew these missions understood the limitations better than planners sitting safely in England. Lieutenant Colonel Bern Lay Jr., one of General Eaker's staff officers, flew as an observer on the Regensburg raid in August 1943. His article in the Saturday Evening Post, published that November, described what precision bombing looked like from inside the formation. On we flew through the cluttered wake of a desperate air battle, where disintegrating aircraft were commonplace and the white dots of 60 parachutes in the air at one time were hardly worth a second look, Lay wrote. Had it not been for the squeezing in my stomach, which was trying to purge, I might have easily been watching an animated cartoon in a movie theatre. John Comer, a flight engineer serving in the top turret of a 381st Bomb Group B-17, reported similar observations. At times it looked like the entire Luftwaffe was lined up at 12 o'clock high, he recalled after the war. During the bomb run itself, when the bombardier took control through the Norden's autopilot connection, the aircraft flew straight and level. No evasive maneuvers, no defensive turns, just steady flight while German anti-aircraft gunners adjusted their aim. The flak was so accurate by 1943 that pilots could set watches by the interval between bursts. A 1943 Army study examined B-17 losses and reached a sobering conclusion. About half of all bombers lost in combat had left formation. Mechanical failure forced some to fall behind. Battle damage crippled others. Fighter attacks deliberately targeted stragglers, but formation discipline was the only defense. The staggered combat box wing formation gave B-17s interlocking fields of fire, creating what planners called 1,000 yards of protective coverage in every direction. That protection only worked if every aircraft maintained position. Anti-aircraft defenses forced bombers to fly at 25,000 feet or higher beyond the Norden's optimal operating altitude. The flak was so intense over German industrial centers that pilots took evasive action during bomb runs, destroying the stable platform the Norden required. Fighter attacks disrupted formations, breaking up the lead bomber technique where one highly skilled bombardier guided multiple aircraft. German anti-aircraft doctrine had evolved specifically to counter American daylight precision bombing. Flak batteries were deployed in concentric rings around critical targets. The outer rings engaged bombers during approach, forcing formations to climb and maneuver. Inner rings concentrated fire on the target area itself, creating a box of airspace saturated with shell fragments. German 88mm guns fired time-fused shells that detonated at preset altitudes, creating shrapnel patterns that could shred aircraft structures. It took an average of 16,000 88mm shells to destroy one Allied heavy bomber. This statistic, compiled by German Anti-Aircraft Command and confirmed by post-war analysis, revealed both the inefficiency of flak and its cumulative effect. If each gun fired 50 shells per mission, and each battery included 6 guns, then approximately 53 batteries firing at a single formation of 36 bombers could expect to down one aircraft. The Germans deployed far more than 53 batteries around priority targets like Schweinfurt, the Ruhr industrial region, and Berlin. The psychological impact of flak exceeded its physical destruction. Bomber crews described the experience of flying through flak as the most terrifying aspect of combat. German fighters could be evaded, outmaneuvered, or shot down. Flak was impersonal, unavoidable, omnipresent. The shells appeared as black puffs against the sky. When bursts came close enough, crews heard the sound of fragments hitting aluminum skin. The fragments were irregularly shaped pieces of steel casing, hot enough to ignite hydraulic fluid, large enough to sever control cables or puncture fuel tanks. Most fundamentally, the bombs themselves defied precision. American bombers carried general-purpose bombs designed for blast effect against multiple target types. These weapons were not precision instruments. Quality control issues meant ballistic coefficients varied significantly. Bombs tumbled unpredictably during descent. Terminal velocity variations created impact dispersions measuring hundreds of feet. The mathematical reality was unforgiving. A bomb dropped from 25,000 feet descended for approximately 60 seconds. At terminal velocity of roughly 500 feet per second, even a 1% error in drag coefficient calculation meant a 50-foot impact deviation. Wind shear could deflect the bomb's trajectory by hundreds of feet. Temperature inversions created density gradients that altered ballistic paths. The Norden could calculate release point to within yards. The bomb scattered impact points across acres. American doctrine evolved, not by acknowledging the Norden's limitations, but by changing tactics to compensate. The lead bomber technique concentrated targeting responsibility on one highly trained bombardier in a formation. When his bombs dropped, other aircraft released simultaneously. This technique improved accuracy slightly by reducing human error across multiple crews, but it did nothing to address fundamental ballistic dispersion. The evolution of this doctrine revealed increasing desperation. Early war missions featured loose formations of 6 aircraft bombing independently. Each bombardier aimed his own bombs using his own Norden Bombsight. The theory was that trained bombardiers using precision equipment would achieve precision results. Within months, combat experience destroyed this theory. By mid-1943, formations had tightened considerably. 3 aircraft formed an element. 4 elements formed a squadron of 12 bombers. 3 squadrons formed a group of 36 bombers. The groups flew in staggered formations called combat boxes, with aircraft positioned high, low, left, and right to create overlapping defensive fire. This defensive necessity conflicted with bombing precision. Aircraft in the high and low squadrons could not possibly aim at the same point as the lead squadron. They bombed on the leader's signal, releasing when they saw his bombs drop. Formation density increased. Early war missions featured 6 aircraft bombing from a tight formation. By 1944, formations expanded to 36 aircraft. More bombers meant more bombs, increasing the probability that some ordnance would hit the intended target. It was area saturation disguised as precision targeting. Target selection shifted. Early war plans called for destroying specific buildings within industrial complexes. By mid-war, entire factory districts became the aim point. Strategic targeting evolved from "destroy this machine shop" to "destroy this section of the city." The terminology changed from precision bombing to strategic bombing, a semantic evasion that obscured the gap between doctrine and reality. The bomber offensive did devastating damage to German industry and civilian morale, but not through the pinpoint destruction the Norden Bombsight promised. The destruction came from overwhelming numbers. In 1944, the 8th Air Force flew bombing missions involving over 1,000 heavy bombers. Each B-17 carried up to 8,000 pounds of bombs. The arithmetic was simple: carpet an area with 10,500-pound bombs, and critical targets within that area would be hit regardless of individual bomb accuracy. German defenders understood this evolution before American planners openly acknowledged it. Post-war interrogations of captured Luftwaffe personnel revealed that German air defense doctrine by 1943 assumed American bombing was effectively area bombardment, despite propaganda claims of precision. German fighter tactics focused on breaking up American formations, knowing that dispersed bombers bombing individually produced far less effective destruction than concentrated formations, releasing simultaneously on a lead bombardier's signal. The Norden Bombsight's reputation survived the war intact, despite its battlefield failure to meet advertised performance. Several factors preserved the myth. Security restrictions remained in place through 1944. Public discussion of the device was prohibited. Combat footage showing bombing results was carefully edited to highlight successful strikes while omitting misses. The phrase, "pickle barrel accuracy from 20,000 feet," became accepted truth through repetition, despite having no basis in operational reality. The atomic bombing missions sealed the legend. On August 6, 1945, the B-29 Enola Gay dropped an atomic bomb on Hiroshima using a specially modified Norden Bombsight. The bomb detonated approximately 800 feet from the aim point, the Ioi bridge. This was considered excellent accuracy for a high-altitude drop. More importantly, the immense blast radius of the atomic bomb made precision largely irrelevant. The weapon destroyed everything within 2 miles, regardless of exact impact location. The media narrative emphasized that American technology, the Norden Bombsight, had enabled this war-winning strike. The narrative ignored that conventional strategic bombing had required hundreds of aircraft, dropping thousands of bombs to achieve destruction that one atomic weapon accomplished through sheer yield. The Norden had been built for a precision warfare that proved impossible. Its true success came in missions where precision didn't matter. Post-war analysis by the United States Strategic Bombing Survey examined the effectiveness of the combined bomber offensive against Germany. The survey's findings, classified and downplayed for years, confirmed what German engineers had concluded in 1938. Strategic bombing from high altitude using available bomb sites could not achieve the precision necessary to destroy specific industrial targets reliably. What worked was overwhelming tonnage applied against large area targets. German synthetic oil production eventually collapsed, not because specific refineries were precisely destroyed, but because persistent raids made production untenable. The transportation system broke down under repeated attacks on rail marshalling yards. These were large targets where hitting anywhere within a several hundred-yard radius disrupted operations. German fighter production declined, not because aircraft factories were surgically struck, but because disruption of component suppliers created cascading shortages. The bomber offensive succeeded through attrition and interdiction, not through the pinpoint destruction the Norden promised. German civilian deaths from bombing exceeded 600,000. These casualties resulted overwhelmingly from area attacks on cities, not precision strikes on military targets. The distinction between British night area bombing and American day precision bombing, maintained so carefully in Allied propaganda, narrowed significantly in practice. Both campaigns relied on saturation bombing of large area targets. The technological lesson the Norden Bombsight taught was profound but unacknowledged during the war. Precision attack requires precision weapons, not merely precise aiming devices. The ballistic dispersion of unguided gravity bombs sets a fundamental accuracy flaw that sophisticated bombsights cannot overcome. This lesson would be forgotten and relearned repeatedly in subsequent conflicts. In Korea, B-29s flew strategic bombing missions with Norden bombsights, achieving results similar to World War II. Approximately 25% of bombs fell within 500 yards of the aim point. Bridge attacks required dozens of sorties. Factories were destroyed through repeated area attacks, not single precision strikes. Vietnam saw similar patterns. Strategic bombing of North Vietnamese targets failed to achieve the precision necessary to avoid civilian casualties while destroying military infrastructure. The infamous Paul Doumer Bridge near Hanoi endured over 800 attack sorties before finally being rendered unusable. Precision remained elusive. The technological solution emerged only with guided munitions. Laser-guided bombs introduced in Vietnam allowed genuine precision attack. Television-guided weapons provided standoff accuracy. Eventually, GPS-guided joint direct attack munitions achieved the accuracy the Norden had promised. These weapons used computer guidance not to calculate release point, but to steer the bomb during descent, continuously correcting for wind, drag, and ballistic variations. Modern precision strike aircraft can reliably place bombs within 10 feet of the aim point from any altitude in any weather. This capability comes from guided weapons, not sophisticated bombsights. The aiming system in a modern fighter is vastly more sophisticated than the Norden, but it still cannot overcome ballistic dispersion of unguided weapons. The physics remain unforgiving. The German engineers who examined captured Norden bombsights in 1938 understood something. American planners refused to acknowledge until precision-guided munitions made the lesson undeniable. You cannot achieve precision with imprecise weapons. The most sophisticated aiming device cannot compensate for fundamental limitations in the projectile itself. The Norden bombsight represented extraordinary American engineering and manufacturing capability. Over 90,000 units were produced at a cost exceeding $1 billion in 1940s currency. 50,000 bombardiers were trained in its operation. The device incorporated innovations in gyroscopic stabilization, analog computation, and electromechanical integration that influenced post-war electronics development. But it failed its primary mission. It did not enable precision strategic bombing from 20,000 feet. It could not overcome weather, defenses, and ballistic dispersion. The gap between theoretical accuracy under perfect conditions and operational accuracy under combat conditions was insurmountable, given World War II technology. The Germans had recognized this limitation immediately upon examining Lang's stolen plans. They built the device. They tested it. They concluded it offered no advantage worth the enormous complexity. Then they developed simpler systems that worked adequately for the tactical bombing doctrine Germany actually employed. The irony was profound. America's most jealously guarded secret weapon, protected by elaborate security measures and defended by sacred oaths, had been compromised before the war began. The Germans who stole it concluded it was impressive but impractical. And the Americans who built it discovered bomb by bomb, mission by mission, year by bloody year, that the Germans had been right. When the war ended, approximately 200,000 8th Air Force crewmen had flown combat missions over Europe. Nearly 50,000 had been killed. Thousands more were wounded or became prisoners. They flew in bombers named Flying Fortress and Liberator, protected by armor and bristling with machine guns. They aimed bombs using devices that cost 50 times their weight in gold and supposedly worked miracles. The casualty statistics told the true story of daylight precision bombing. During the first year of operations over Germany, only 36% of bomber crews completed their required tour of 25 missions. This meant that nearly two-thirds of all crews were killed, severely wounded, or captured before finishing their tours. By the end of 1943, only 25% of 8th Air Force personnel had survived 25 missions. The mathematical reality was stark. If you flew bombers in 1943, you had a 3 in 4 chance of dying, being maimed, or spending years in German prison camps. These statistics improved somewhat in 1944 when long-range fighter escorts became available. The P-51 Mustang, powered by a Packard-built Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, could escort bombers to Berlin and back. German fighters, which had slaughtered bomber formations in 1943, now faced American fighters that were faster, more maneuverable, and present in overwhelming numbers. When Lieutenant General Jimmy Doolittle took command of 8th Air Force in January 1944, he made a critical doctrinal change. Fighter escorts were no longer required to stay with bomber formations. Instead, they flew ahead, engaging German fighters before they could reach the bombers. The bombs still scattered across the German countryside. The factories were destroyed eventually, not through precision, but through overwhelming repetition. The strategic bombing campaign succeeded in wearing down German industry and morale, but not the way the doctrine had envisioned, not the way the Norden promised. In the interrogation room at FBI headquarters in June 1941, Hermann Lang finally confessed. He admitted stealing the bomb site plans. He acknowledged meeting with Nikolaus Ritter. He confirmed traveling to Germany to brief Luftwaffe engineers. The agents taking his statement recorded every detail for prosecution. None of them knew that Lang's espionage, devastating as it seemed, had actually harmed Germany more than America. The stolen bomb site had convinced German engineers that American strategic bombing doctrine was fundamentally flawed. This conviction meant Germany never developed effective high-altitude bombing capability. When the strategic situation deteriorated and Germany needed long-range bombers to strike Soviet industrial centers beyond the Urals, they had nothing suitable. German bomber development had focused on tactical support aircraft, medium bombers with limited range and bomb load, dive bombers for precise attacks at low altitude. These aircraft served Wehrmacht ground forces well during blitzkrieg operations in Poland, France, and early Soviet campaigns. They were inadequate for strategic bombing of distant targets that Germany could not reach with ground forces. By 1943, Germany needed weapons that could strike Soviet factories relocated beyond the Urals, bombers that could hit American air bases in Britain, aircraft that could interdict Allied supply lines in the Atlantic beyond fighter escort range. They had nothing. The He-177, designed as a strategic bomber, entered service in tiny numbers and failed operationally. The Ju-89 long-range bomber never advanced beyond prototypes. Meanwhile, America's flawed strategic bombing doctrine, enabled by the imperfect Norden Bombsight, still achieved devastating results. Not through precision, but through industrial capacity that could sustain 1,000-bomber raids week after week. The Norden promised accuracy it could not deliver, but American production delivered bombs in quantities that made individual accuracy less critical. German engineers had been right about the Norden's limitations, but they had been wrong about the broader lesson. Technology advantage matters less than the ability to employ that technology at overwhelming scale. 1,000 bombers with imperfect bomb sights could destroy more targets than 100 bombers with perfect sights. Production capacity mattered more than precision. The Norden Bombsight demonstrated something more profound than American technological sophistication. It demonstrated American willingness to invest enormous resources in a single weapons system based on theoretical performance. $1 billion in an era when entire tank divisions cost less. 2,000 precision parts per unit when German bomb sites used 200. 3 months training per bombardier when German training took 2 weeks. Only a nation with America's industrial capacity and economic resources could afford such profligacy. Only a nation secure from invasion could divert resources to perfecting devices that offered marginal advantage. Germany, fighting on 3 fronts with limited resources, had to prioritize weapons that worked adequately over weapons that promised perfection. The Norden Bombsight's real contribution to Allied victory was not its accuracy, it was what its existence revealed about American capability. If America could produce 90,000 precision analog computers for a single weapon system, what else could they produce? If American factories could manufacture 2,000 precision parts per bomb site at tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch, what did that suggest about production capacity for tanks, aircraft, and artillery? German intelligence officers examining captured Norden bomb sites in 1943 reached the same conclusion their counterparts had reached examining proximity fuses and cavity magnetrons. American technological capability exceeded German understanding. More importantly, American industrial capacity could deploy that technology at scales Germany could never match. This was the true revelation the Norden bombsight provided to German engineers. Not that America had built a precision bombing device, but that America had built 90,000 of them while simultaneously producing 50,000 tanks, 300,000 aircraft, and 87,000 landing craft. The precision of individual weapons mattered less than the overwhelming quantity deployed. In the end, the story of the Norden bombsight is not about accuracy or even about espionage. It is about the collision between theoretical perfection and operational reality, about the gap between what engineers promise and what weapons actually achieve, about the difference between laboratory demonstrations and battlefield performance. About the hard lesson that wars are won not by perfect weapons, but by adequate weapons produced in overwhelming numbers and employed with relentless persistence. The German engineers who examined Hermann Lang's stolen plans in 1938 understood the device's limitations immediately. American bombardiers learned those same limitations over 4 years of combat, one mission at a time, watching bombs fall harmlessly into German fields while flak tore through their formations. The technology was impressive, the doctrine was flawed, and the outcome was determined not by which side had better bomb sights, but by which side had more bombers. The lesson Germany learned, ironically, damaged German strategic capabilities. By correctly identifying the Norden's limitations, German planners concluded that precision strategic bombing was inherently futile. This conviction meant Germany never developed effective, long-range heavy bombers. When the strategic situation deteriorated, and Germany desperately needed capability to strike Soviet industrial centers beyond the Urals, they had nothing. The He-177 bomber, designed as Germany's answer to the B-17, entered service in tiny numbers and failed operationally. It was too little, too late, and fundamentally flawed. German bomber doctrine focused on tactical support for ground forces. This was the correct choice for blitzkrieg operations in Poland, France, and early Soviet campaigns. Ju-87 Stuka dive bombers could place 500-pound bombs within yards of the aim point, devastating enemy strongpoints and enabling rapid Wehrmacht advances. This precision came at the cost of vulnerability. Stukas were slow, lightly armored, and easy prey for modern fighters. They worked brilliantly when Germany controlled the air. They were slaughtered when air superiority belonged to the enemy. The absence of strategic bombers meant Germany could not strike British and American industrial centers, could not interdict Atlantic supply lines beyond fighter range, could not destroy Soviet tank factories relocated beyond German reach. The tactical excellence that served Germany well in 1939 through 1941 became a strategic liability by 1943, and the conviction that precision bombing was impossible, derived from correctly analyzing the Norden, contributed to this strategic blindness. The Norden Bombsight promised to drop bombs into pickle barrels from 20,000 feet. In practice, it helped drop millions of bombs across German industrial districts with enough repetition that critical targets were eventually destroyed. That was not the precision warfare doctrine had envisioned, but it was enough to win the war. Sometimes adequate technology deployed at overwhelming scale defeats perfect technology deployed in limited quantities. The Germans learned that lesson too, late. The Americans never quite acknowledged they had needed to learn it at all. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.